All right, I want to talk about chemicals for just a moment. And the first thing I want to talk about would be the storage temperatures. And this is just like when you store your foodstuffs, that you store it in a dry location and a location that has a moderate temperature that doesn't freeze and it doesn't get very hot. The reason for this is that when chemicals undergo these fluctuations in temperatures, it could make the chemical less effective, not effective, or sometimes more effective than when the chemical was originally placed into the container in which you purchase it. I also want to talk about the class of chemicals that we consider biological controls. And those are things such as ladybugs can be a biological control. Buying insect eggs that are predatory insects, those are biological controls, things of that nature. And also some of the botanicals. And the botanicals are a class of chemicals which are simply made from plant extracts. Now, these items may only be viable for 1 or maybe 2 seasons. It depends on what the product is. So even though you store it at the proper temperature, it still may not be effective when you go to use it if you've had it too long. And you should always read the label. And this information isn't necessarily going to be on the label. It's things you just have to know or you have to go and research. Another thing that I want to talk about here is when you buy the products, it can be very, very confusing. And the reason for this is that when you're buying pesticides, there's something that's called the product name. And in this case, the product name of the bag, the high yield bag here, is Dipel. There's also something called the trade name. And in this case, the trade name is Dipel. Another product that you would probably be familiar with would be a product called 7. And the product name and the trade name of this is 7. However, the active ingredient or the common name is carbaryl. So this can be very confusing. So let me explain a few things to you about this. Most of the time, whenever I put a video out and I talk about pesticides, I will always try and give you the common name or the active ingredient that you're looking for. The reason I'm going to do this is because there are a lot of things on the market that may be the exact same chemical, but they have a different trade name or product name. And if you go to a very large garden center or someplace that would carry a great deal of your garden chemicals, you'll see this. If you actually look at the chemicals on the shelf, you may actually see the exact same product by 2 different companies, but they're essentially the same product. Sometimes you pay more depending on how much advertising is done. However, you can buy the same chemical, the same active ingredient under other names and pay less for it. Okay, let's look at these chemicals right here for just a moment. Okay, the active ingredient in this is BT. It's Bacillus thuringiensis, and the subspecies is Crostacea. Sometimes you'll see SSP, or here it says SUBSP, and sometimes you'll see VAR, which means variety. So all these basically, the subspecies and variety can be interchanged. What you're really looking for is BT Crostacea, okay? There are other types of BT available, and they may or may not work on the insect you need to control in your garden. For instance, this BT is effective on many different types of caterpillars. However, it's not very effective on beetles such as Colorado potato beetle. You would need a different type of BT, and that is a BT San Diego that you would look for in that case. So you have to read the label and know what you're buying. So always look at the active ingredient. Alright, another important thing to note about chemicals is that oftentimes, and we find more and more as newer products come onto the market and are less toxic to our environment and to us as human beings, you'll find that you have to apply the chemical at the right stage of growth development in the insect. So it's important to understand how many stages of that insect you may have in a growing season, and at what stage that particular chemical actually works well on the insect you're trying to kill. Okay, for instance, Bacillus thuringiensis subspecies San Diego will work on Colorado potato beetle when the insect is very young in the larval stages, particularly the first and second instar stages. And the first and second instar is just a fancy way to say the very first two stages of the larvae's life. It's the first week or so. I can't tell you exactly because that is dependent on temperatures. The temperature drives how quickly that insect grows and develops. Okay, however, if you used BT San Diego and expected to get good control on the adult beetles, well, my answer would be lots of luck, because it's not going to work. You have to use it on the larval stages. So it's important to understand the entire growth cycle of insects when you are applying pesticides, and we'll talk about that more later also. And when I talk about different pests and how to control them, I'll get into that information too. Okay, here are active ingredients. Is just as our label says, it's rotenone and pyrethrins. Sometimes you'll need to look for a rotenone and pyrethrin mix. Many times these two products are combined together for more efficacy or better control for several reasons. One, rotenone is effective, however it's very short-lived. Pyrethrin gives you a little more kick and also may work on an adult stage of an insect, and not where the rotenone may only work with the larval stage of an insect. And the pyrethrin is also short-lived, just a few days, but these two things are often combined into one product when you go to buy it. Okay, so just to recap, I want to make sure that you're looking for active ingredients, not necessarily the product name / trade name. Most of the time when I watch videos and I see people talking about a chemical that they've used, they use the trade name. However, the same chemical can be purchased under several trade names depending on who is manufacturing or which chemical company is putting out the product. So you may have 6 chemical companies that put out the exact same product and they each call it something different. So look for the common name or the active ingredients in the product you're buying. And you should always read the label and follow the label according to the label directions, because some products may not be harmful to you because you're a mammal, but it may be very harmful and toxic to fish oftentimes. Many of our chemicals are very toxic to fish, so if you have a stream or pond on your property, you have to be careful with those products. The other thing I want to talk about is pesticide classes. I don't know if you're familiar with actually rotating chemicals. And when we talk about rotating chemicals, the reason we do that is because we want to rotate the chemical class when we're applying a chemical to a particular crop over and over. Or if you're applying the same type of chemical class over and over throughout a growing season, this can make the chemical ineffective. It also, and the reason for that is because the insects can build up tolerances to those chemicals. So we like to rotate chemicals via chemical class. And for instance, we have different pesticide classes such as carbamates, organophosphates, pyrethroids, botanicals, and biologicals. Now, oftentimes the carbamates, the organophosphates, and sometimes the pyrethroids, they may kill the insect by the same mode of action, meaning oftentimes those are nerve agents. And then, of course, it can vary between with the botanical. Sometimes the botanical acts as a barrier. There's just different ways botanicals can act. And then biologicals oftentimes are predatory insects. Okay, I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, leave me a message and let me know, and let people know that I'm going to try and put some information out there for you home gardeners to try and dispel the myths, make it easy to understand pesticides and how they use, how they're used and why you may or may not use it in any particular case. I've got some videos that I'm working on that'll be coming up pretty soon. Okay, the one thing I did forget to mention is that when I make these videos, I will try and tell you what pesticide class a particular chemical falls into so that you'll have an idea of how to rotate your chemicals. If I, neglect to do this, just give me a holler and I'll make sure I correct that and put it in the, if I don't say it in the video, I'll put it in the description area.